Chapter 7. Observation Outdoors. Both the youth group leader and the military tracking instructor will find that as the training moves outdoors, the students will become more interested. For the student, the training and exercises become more closely associated with tracking proper. With visual training skills outdoors, there is one very important difference that has to be brought home to the potential tracker. Visual training, now, is training to observe coupled with the knowledge of how to conceal yourself. Outdoors observation has an added difficulty in that the range of vision varies. In subtypes of terrain, for instance, the sand seas of the large deserts, it is practically limitless, whereas in scrub or secondary jungle, it is very restricted. Those who are accustomed to living in open spaces have usually much keener eyesight than those who live in towns, and the specific environment affects the ability to observe over the full range. For instance, the desert-dwelling Bedouin has a remarkably clear long vision, whereas jungle aborigines have a keen eye for the detail of sign. The town-dwelling Westerner can adapt, but he must be aware of what he is trying to do and his limitations. However, he can make remarkable progress in a limited time. He will find that his learning curve is exponential. He will achieve a great deal at first, so long as he persists, but to emulate fully the Dayak or Iban trackers from Southeast Asia would take him years of living in their environment. There is an important lesson of observation to be learned from the following story. Common sense and a little reflection will often suggest to you the most likely places in which to look. While in Dhofar with the SAS in the early 1970s, I became embroiled in a gentle challenge. One of the local hill tribesmen with whom we were operating tried, good-naturedly, to get the upper hand of the foreign soldier by asking me how many goats were on the opposite mountainside. It was hardly possible to make out that there were any goats there at all, let alone count them. I could only make out a few whitish specks, but not to be outdone, after admitting I couldn't count all the goats, I told him where the goat herders were, how many there were, and who they were. I knew that the goat herders would be women, and that there would be two of them, for company and as chaperones for each other. I couldn't actually see them, but I guesstimated that in the heat of the day, they would be two black figures huddled under the largest, shadiest tree of the uphill side of the flock. A look through binoculars showed this to be correct. Observe, remember, select and analyze, comprehend and deduce. The use of sight is the primary means by which a tracker gathers and accumulates information, but seeing is more than just a question of looking. An understanding of why things are seen will assist a tracker in searching and detecting the quarry and its sign, and also help him to conceal himself. 6 factors attract attention and determine why things are seen. See Figure 15. Shape. Personal equipment and the human body are familiar outlines to us all. They can be recognized instantly, particularly when they are in contrast to their surroundings. Distinctive shapes stand out and are more easily detected. For example, someone wearing a raincoat, a hat, rubber boots, or carrying an umbrella or a shotgun. Remember, your shape and the quarry shape can be easily disguised by standing motionless in front of an appropriate background. Shadow. Shadows are cast in sunlight, moonlight, and artificial light. An object casts a shadow which may give away its presence. On the other hand, an object that is concealed in other shadows is harder to detect and does not cast a shadow of its own. The tracking student must be aware that as the sun, moon, or artificial light moves, so do the shadows. Objects that were concealed by shadow may now be revealed as they themselves cast their own distinctive shadow, or as they come out of the obscuring shadow. There is another category of shadow, contained shadow. Contained shadow is that which is within a space, for example, a hut, a room, a cave, or a tent. It is normally darker than the other shadows and can therefore attract attention. You will have seen this type of shadow depicted in detective films, where all that is seen of the murderer with his upraised arms and knife is his shadow inside the room or the tent. See Figure 16. A significant point about shadows relates specifically to sign. When a person walks over a carpet of leaves, they pile up in the direction of the movement. Depending on the light, a shadow will be visible, cast by the built-up leaves. An object silhouetted against a contrasting background is conspicuous. Smooth, flat backgrounds such as water, snow, fields, or most extreme of all, the sky. An object may be silhouetted if it is against a contrasting background, for example, dark objects against a light background, and vice versa. Surface and shine. In the color and texture of the surface of an object contrasts with its surroundings, it will be conspicuous. Shiny objects and white skin contrast violently with most backgrounds. Spacing. Nature very rarely, if ever, spaces objects regularly. Therefore, the tracker should be alert to regularly spaced objects, even if they appear natural. Apart from the obvious explanation of trees and bushes planted by man, the items may be more sinister camouflaged objects. Movement. Sudden movement attracts the eye. This is easily demonstrated by half concealing a number of people and inviting others to spot them. They will do so with difficulty while those concealed remain still, but when they move, they will spot them easily. Sudden movement is easily seen. Although the tiger is in its prey's line of sight, it is not seen until it launches its attack. You will realize the importance of stealthy movement when you come to practice stalking. Observation techniques. Now, understanding why objects are seen, we are able to study the next subject, the proper use of our eyes. This may seem a simple idea, but if you have a technique on which to concentrate, you will not fall into the trap of looking and not seeing. In basic military training, the instructor often spots the raw recruit whose head is turning back and forth as he patrols along the exercise. He seems to be alert, but nothing that his gaze falls upon registers in his brain. He is looking without seeing. Consequently, he will not be able to remember anything from which to draw any conclusions. As a tracker, he is worse than useless. There are two interrelated techniques, scanning and searching. Scanning. This is a general systematic examination of an area to detect any unusual or significant object or movement. To scan an area, the following actions are recommended: foreground, middle distance, distance. Note, the size of the half circle in figure 17 can be any size depending on the tracker's observational ability and visibility. Scan each area horizontally, starting with the foreground. To obtain maximum efficiency, the head in short overlapping movements. Move the head in short overlapping movements. Moving the head as opposed to the eyes will minimize eye fatigue. The speed at which scanning is carried out will depend on the type of ground being observed, that is, whether it is open or close country. When the horizontal scanning is complete, scan along the line of the features that are angled away from the observation position. As a tracker, your eyes can scan from about 5 to 10 meters out until sign is located. When you scan, your head and eyes must keep moving slowly from side to side and in a figure 8 pattern. This is especially important in close country such as secondary forest. This assists the tracker in looking through and not at the vegetation. Having picked up marks or signs, then move closer to inspect. Searching. This is the next phase and may take place at any stage during the scanning. Any suspected movement or object spotted during the scanning requires an immediate, more thorough visual study, a visual search of the area as opposed to a physical search. If you're observing for movement, it is better to stare at a place for a while and only move the head and the eyes occasionally. Anything that moves will then attract the eye. Where to look. Sign is easier to find in some places than others. The following are places where sign will be most obvious: near any source of water, on muddy and sandy patches, in high grass or thick undergrowth, on steep hillsides, on the edges of clearings, where obstacles have to be crossed. What to look for. As you're scanning and searching, you should remember each of the factors that make an object visible: shape, shadow, silhouette, surface shine, spacing, movement. On the move. Your eyes, ears, and nose are constantly monitoring the environment. Every few minutes, depending on how close you suspect the quarry to be, and certainly not less than every 10 minutes, you stop and listen. Eyes must be trained to disregard the general pattern of foliage immediately to the front and to look through rather than at it. Another invaluable tactic is to get down on the ground and look through the undergrowth for any sign or sighting of the quarry. You have to survey both near and far and inspect objects both large and small. When any unusual sign or sound is noted, you must freeze quickly and silently. Do not move until you've investigated with a visual search. Before and after studies. This is the application of very detailed observation to determine whether the quarry has entered an area or not. The basis of this technique is an in-depth study of what could be termed a micro-area to establish what its appearance is in its undisturbed state compared to the same area when the quarry has passed through it. The format for this study is a description of an area in its pristine condition, the original state. This is then followed by a list of the alterations caused by the passage of the quarry. Finally, the tracker can take confirmatory actions to gain more evidence. Some examples will illustrate the attention to detail necessary at this stage of the tracker's development. I include a generous list because this is excellent material for use by the tracking instructor. Example 1. Leaf and twig covered area. Natural state. Dried twigs, flaking bark, and leaf surfaces will all be aged to the same degree. Disturbed state. No actual prints, but depressions left. Twigs squashed, bent, and broken. Freshly broken twigs will be lighter in color and will have fine fibers left at the ends. Where bark has been knocked off, the freshly exposed area will be darker or lighter and may have a layer of dried powder or granulated debris. Overturned leaves will expose darker or lighter sand-speckled undersides. Squashed, crumbled, bent, or broken leaves will show the lighter colors of their fresh break together with the exposed fine hairs of the tear. In the case of both knocked off bark and overturned leaves, you must compare pristine samples in the original state. This will confirm whether the underside of the leaf or bark is darker or lighter in that environment and whether there is a layer of dried powder or granulated debris. Confirmatory actions. Check bent leaves for flexibility. Lightly blow on tilted leaves to check their stability. Study leaves for any transfer deposits, sand or mud. Feel with the fingertips in any depressions for the outline of a print. Remove leaves from a depression and check for the impression of a print underneath. Study worm casts under these leaves for evidence of disturbance. Example 2. Leaf and twig covered area with growing vegetation. Natural state, same as example 1. No damage to the growing vegetation. Disturbed state, same as example 1. Damage to the growing vegetation including bruising and scraping. Confirmatory actions, same as example 1. Scrutinize any damage for sap evidence. Make a comparative scrape or damage on an identical plant and note the differences in color, smell, and viscosity of the fresh sap. Search for living leaves removed from their parent plant and study these for aging. Use any scrapes to assess the direction of movement as well as age. Example 3. Leaf and twig covered area with exposed roots. Natural state, same as example 1. Roots on earth mounds. Disturbed state, same as example 1. Roots that have been rocked off their earth supports. Sap flowing from damaged roots. Imprint of the root adjacent to its original position. Confirmatory actions, same as example 1. Force the root into the stepped-on position to give the direction of travel. Compare the smell, texture, and color of the sap. Check the roots for scuff marks. Example 4. Clumps of vegetation interspersed with rocks and stones. Natural state. This is usually open country exposed to the effects of the elements. Large patches of clear, uniform earth. Disturbed state. Prints in the earth. The earth crust around the sides of the stones and rocks will show signs of disruption. Confirmatory actions. Check for prints. Study the vegetation for damage. Compare disturbed stones with the surrounding stones. Note any deposits of earth on stones and rocks. When cross-referenced with the time of the last rainfall, this will give a time bracket. Example 5. Forest floor with a deposit of twigs. Natural state, same as example 1. Unbroken dead branches and twigs. Disturbed state, same as example 1. Broken sticks. Confirmatory actions, same as example 1. Examine the breaks. If the sticks is in 3 parts, that is, there are 2 brakes, it is usually evidence, although not positive proof, that a man has trodden on the stick because of the way humans distribute their weight as they walk. The center part that is pushed in the direction of travel is a pointer. Example 6, a stand of saplings. Natural state, trees are upright and parallel. Disturbed state, some plants not in line with the rest. Confirmatory actions, study the leaves of a broken stem to see whether they are still fresh. This gives an indication of the age of the sign. Inspect the break on the trunk. If the ends are the same color, then the break is less than 7 hours old. If it is an old break, the ends will have died and turned brown. Example 7, gradients. Natural state, undisturbed. Disturbed state, prints. Confirmatory actions. Are there slide marks? This indicates a tired person who is not confirming his step before transferring weight. Check between the prints for walking stick marks as more information as to the state of the person. Examine vegetation that may have been used as a climbing aid. This will give an insight into the morale, fitness, and training of the quarry. Fit, well-trained troops would not be tempted into this practice because it can easily telegraph their location as the tops of the trees move. Direction of travel can be assessed by the relative depth of the parts of the print, even if the print is not distinctive enough to show a clear heel and toe. A person walking uphill produces a deeper print on the toe as opposed to the heel, while a person walking down a gradient pushes debris in front of the print. Some exercises for youth leaders. Just as there are indoor games that teachers and youth leaders can use to develop the powers of observation, memory, and deduction, there are also games and exercises suitable for outdoor use, such as laying trails of varying standards of difficulty and in a variety of scenarios. Also, during walks, whether in the town or in the country, the group under training can be quizzed on items that they have passed. To ensure that the habit of observing becomes firmly entrenched, there should be an element of surprise and competition. See also Chapter 17, dedicated to the training function. To emphasize to any group of students the seriousness of the topic, they can be subjected to a more advanced exercise based on the Royal Marine Sniper Test. In this modified practice, 12 objects are placed in an arc in front of the observers up to 300 meters from the observer's position and invisible to the naked eye. The students are issued a copy of a panorama photograph of the arc. With the aid of binoculars, the students are then told to observe the arc for 40 minutes, describe any foreign objects, and plot them into the copy of the photograph. The standard can be adjusted for age and experience, but the Marines fail any student with less than 8 out of the 12 and deduct fractional points for bad plotting or a poor description. Reporting. There is another important factor connected with observation outdoors, and that is the necessity for recording in one's mind or on paper exactly what has been observed. A tracker is not much use to others unless he can communicate what he's observed. Your training in observation outdoors must, of necessity, include making reports, making rough sketch maps, and as your level of expertise advances, making sketches. Summary. Scanning and search. Divide the area into foreground, middle distance, distance. Where to look. The following are places where sign will be most obvious. Near any source of water, on muddy and sandy patches, in high grass or thick undergrowth, on steep hillsides, on the edges of clearings, where the obstacles have to be crossed. What to look for. As you're scanning and searching, you should remember each of the factors that make an object visible: shape, shadow, silhouette, surface, shine, spacing, movement. Before and after studies. The format: natural state, disturbed state, confirmatory actions. Observe, remember, select and analyze, comprehend and deduce.